If you need assistance or if you're having any technology issues, please type in the chat and a member of our support team. We have 4 people ready to help you here. So any questions at all, please contact us via chat. So how's it going to work today? We're going to have 120 minutes, 2 hours. We're going to begin with some preset questions. Actually, that will be preceded by an introductory exercise. And then as time allows, we will have questions from the audience. So we're looking forward to both our panelists' responses to the preset questions, as well as we're hoping they can share us some insight on questions that come from the audience. So a few housekeeping things. So all the sessions are going to be recorded and they're posted on the EdFair website and in the Whova app. So families who can't attend today or maybe missed something on Saturday or Sunday, you can still watch all the sessions. Another important note, please be sure to complete the Google form that's linked in the chat. This form enters you into the conference raffle, and panelists are not allowed to win, and provides information needed to mail you your gift if you win one of the raffle things. The raffle prizes include a Chromebook, a $250 gift card, and an Amazon Fire. For those of you who are joining us by phone, you can just text to 510-734-2664 to complete the attendance form via text. So once again, that number, if you're joining us by phone and want to fill out the form, 510-734-2664. If you haven't already, you might want to seriously consider downloading the Whova app. It's very useful. I find it really useful. It'll enable you to access all the conference session links, read bios of the panelists, explore community organizations in the exhibitor section, and view pre-recorded sessions covering a range of topics. The conference code is EdFair 2021. That's EdFair with a capital E on Ed and a capital F on Fair, EdFair 2021. You can also visit the West Contra Costa Education Fair website. That's at wccedfair.com. So www.wccedfair.com to find videos and agenda details, and all the sessions are archived there. And one last thing, there is a session feedback form for every session found in Whova. Please take a few minutes to complete the form after this session. Your feedback is vital to the planning of the 2022 Education Fair, and the feedback forms we got last year were very helpful in us making this year's Ed Fair even better than last year's. Okay, so now that we're done with the logistics, we're going to move on to the more exciting part of the late afternoon here, and I'd like to invite J.G. LaRochette from Mindful Life to lead us in an opening exercise.
Thanks, Tom, and good evening, everyone. First, I want to shout out the third graders at Coronado Elementary School in 2011, 2012, who were the co-founders of Mindful Life Project and really drove mindfulness to grow in our community. So for those of you who've never done a mindfulness practice before, it's kind of like we talk about physical exercise for physical, well-being. Mindfulness is like mental training, mental exercise. And so we're going to tune in to 2 specific mindful skills, mindful breathing and mindful listening. But the goal is not to clear your mind. It's not to avoid whatever emotions arise. Mindfulness is really about welcoming all experiences as they arise with us with compassion and care. So we train ourselves to really put attention in the present moment through our different mindfulness practices so we can really integrate the brain and really integrate the mind and body. So as we'll practice together just for several moments now, just noticing when the mind wanders into thinking about the future, right? We're in a time where our brains are overloaded with so much information. And specifically, we know the reason mindfulness became part of the healthcare sector in the 1970s Was it anxiety? Was this over fear and worries about the future? And trauma and stress of the past would come back as depression and other symptoms. So we're really training ourselves to let the present moment be as it is, okay? And again, if you've never done this before, the mind will wander. It will do that. That's what it naturally does. No problem, no judgment. So the definition we're playing with is mindfulness is paying attention on purpose without judgment, right? With their 4-year-olds or all the way up to our 110-year-olds in between is training ourselves to be fully welcoming of our thoughts, our emotions, our physical experiences, and what it feels like to be alive inside of us. So find that comfortable position. We'll do it the Mindful Life Project way. Maybe walk your feet as you're seated, maybe back and forth, wiggle your toes, and then just rock your body side to side a little bit. Just find some movement, front, back. And then mindfulness and training is really the seated practice, right? And so then let the body find some stillness. And you can repeat out loud in your mind or out loud in your voice. I've got my feet on the floor. I've got my spine in a line. I've got my hands in my lap. I've got my heart to the sky. And then if possible, we offer that the eyes can gently close. It's really about skillfully going inward, right? The ability to welcome each emotion versus resist or push away. The ability to notice thoughts without getting tugged away by them. So letting the eyes gently close can really help us go inward. If that feels uncomfortable, a soft gaze below is always available. And we'll start by listening to the sound of the bell to practice our mindful listening and try to keep our attention all the way through. So just staying with that sound, right? Other sounds are around you. Thoughts will pop up. We just gently come back to the sound of the bell. One more time, see if you can hear the sound till it's one little point of sound far in the distance. And as we gently train our mind to be in the here and now, we'll start by training it to be focused on sounds around us and just hearing the sounds, not good, not bad, not right, not wrong. Just sounds will arise, we'll bring attention to them, they'll fade away. And in that gap between one sound and the next, maybe thoughts will take us away. And that's normal, and that's okay. And then we just gently come back to the next sound without judgment. So you might hear the sound of the wind or cars. You might hear sounds in the room that you're in, maybe voices of people in the house. Mindfulness is not being in a calm, quiet place. It's being radically present with whatever arises within us. Just notice a sound as a sound. Take a 360-degree view of sounds in front of you, behind you, and to the sides. And just like if we want to make our biceps stronger, and we'll do some arm curls, or maybe we'll do some push-ups or some pull-ups. The moment that mind gets distracted by any experience, it's kind of like letting the body lower down on a push-up. And the moment we notice that we were distracted, that's mindfulness. And that's that mental muscle being trained up. So we celebrate that instead of getting caught up in the thoughts and thinking we're doing it wrong or right. We just notice distraction and gently come back to what we're focused on, which right now is a few more sounds. Try to catch 2 sounds you haven't heard maybe all day long in the next several moments. And now leaving mindful listening in the background of awareness, and we'll just close off with about a minute of mindful breathing. Sounds and breath are the foundational practice of mindfulness because they're the most consistent experiences we have in our lifetime. Sounds will be quieter or louder, but they're there. The breath might be shallow or deeper, but it's always in the present. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, training the mind, the body, and the heart to be connected to the here and now, one breath at a time. So maybe you notice the inhale, the pause, and the exhale. We bring this kind attention, right? This non-judgmental awareness. It's just watching the experience. It's not changing the breath. It's not judging the breath. We know the negative bias of the brain likes to create inner critic stories. Instead of that, we can let it go and just come back to natural breath as it is. Maybe it's the belly, the rise and fall with inhale, exhale. Maybe it's the chest, expansion and contraction, or simply at the nostrils, the cooler air in, the warmer air out, just for about 30 seconds more. We know that the mind loves to project the future and what the worst case scenario can be. It loves to go in the past and try to change experiences and ruminate and hold resentment maybe or regret. The past is gone, the future isn't here yet. All we have is the here and now. So tune into this breath as it is. Maybe just noticing one full cycle without getting distracted. And this practice of finding deep inner refuge within your own self, notice emotions, physical sensations, and instead of resisting and pushing them away, allow them to be with a compassionate heart. And we'll end with the sound of the bell. One last sound all the way till it's gone. Try to keep awareness right there. And then it's your practice, right? Maybe somebody guides us in mindfulness, but mindfulness is what we were born with. We were present, we were curious about the here and now. So just wiggling toes and flaring the eyes open whenever you're ready. And just noticing if you need a stretch, if you need to take a little nap. I hope I didn't start you off falling asleep, but hey, the body, the mind, and the heart will tell us the messages that we need to listen to. So whenever you're ready, letting the eyes open and letting your body, mind, and heart just notice what's new or changed or the same. After practice, usually people might be drooling and falling asleep. So sorry to start us off that way, Tom, but it's back to you, my friend.
JG, that was great. I really appreciate that. I think I got us off to a good start. So we're going to ask all the panelists to take about 30 seconds to just briefly introduce themselves and tell us their name, what brings them to this panel today, and more complete biographies of our panelists can be found in the Whova app. So JG, why don't you start?
Good, thanks, Tom. So JG LaRochette here, founder and director of Mindful Life, was a third grade teacher at Coronado from 2004 to 2012, where my third graders created this organization. And now we serve 25 schools, including 6 in the city of Richmond, and been doing this for about 9 years. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Alexina, could you go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Alexina Rojas. I'm the Center Director of the West County First Five Center. We have 2 locations, one in San Pablo, one in Richmond. And just a correction, I'm not the Executive Director of First Five. That would be Ruth Fernandez, and that would be First Five Contra Costa, but we are a funded program of First Five Contra Costa. And we are a family resource center. We support families who have children between the ages of 0 and 5 years. And we provide parent support, early learning opportunities, and connections to community resources. And I have been in the program for about 14 years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Jen, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm very happy to be here with everyone. My name is Jen Rader, and I am the founder and director of the Health Center at El Cerrito High School, the James Morehouse Project. And we are in our 22nd year of serving young people and families at El Cerrito High School. We also are serving students this year at Korematsu, and in recent years have also done work with young people and families at Stige. And I know there'll be an opportunity to say more about that work. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much. Cynthia, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Cintia Jerez, soy la directora ejecutiva en Summit Public Schools. Una de las escuelas es K2 en El Cerrito y también tenemos una escuela en Richmond que se llama Summit Camp. Estoy súper emocionada de estar con ustedes esta noche y hablar un poquito más de la salud mental.
Thank you so much for that. Joyce, did I see you join? Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great, thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Joyce Sinnott. I'm the Community School Director at Helms Middle School in San Pablo, serving 7th and 8th graders from San Pablo and Richmond. I was the social worker there for 5 years and then have been the Community School Director the last 2 years. As a community school, we focus on not just the academics, but everything else. So that involves promoting a positive climate and culture, health and wellness, as well as student and family engagement. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful, thank you. Brenda, could we ask you to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brenda Romero, and I am the Health and Wellness Program Coordinator at Building Blocks for Kids, or BBK. We are in Richmond, serving families and children since 2005. I have been with BBK since 2012.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
you.
Okay, let's move on to our preset questions. So our first one is, COVID has really impacted so many aspects of our lives. How has it impacted the mental health needs of our community? And Alexina, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I can speak from the perspective of parents primarily. So our families, typically they come to the center. That's where they're able to make social connections. In a non-COVID world, we're also just able to go kind of freely wherever we want. And so now we know that that cannot happen. And so the isolation has been really hard for a lot of the families as they report to us. It's sort of this like opposite situation where they're not able to be with their social networks. And then they have this like overflow of time spent with the people in their homes, which sometimes that's really beautiful. And sometimes it could be stressful depending on what the situation is. So that's something that we've had to support a lot of our families with, is sort of like managing the dynamics of, like, say, co-parenting in the home. And that does really, that causes some stress for parents. I would also say, myself as a parent, I have 6-year-old twins, just the stress of trying to do like working from home or whatever home responsibilities we have while juggling distance learning. So I can speak as a parent, it is very stressful to have all these different new roles and trying to be successful at everything. And so I think it takes a toll on all of us.
Great, thank you so much for that. Brenda, do you want to go next on that?
Sure. So we serve families, and I think one of the biggest struggles has been, financial stress. And we have, during this pandemic, we've worked with organizations to provide financial assistance, but it's still not enough. And so that has been something that, as an organization, we've been really trying to collaborate and really, attend to the needs of parents who, there's a lot of anxiety right now. There's a lot of stress. Similar to what Alexina said, right? Isolation has been very hard. Our programs were in person. And so during this pandemic, we, had to offer everything online, and even that can be stressful. And so, yes.
Okay, thank you. JG, how about if you give us your perspective on that?
Yeah, I would just say, piggybacking on both of you, I think I try to put it in this kind of visualization, right? Pre-pandemic, we were already in a mental health crisis in this country, right? Since 2012, we've seen young people's mental health being so severely increased in challenging ways. And I would say like the visualization is like we hold one bag of regular stress, right? And then you put systemic oppression, racism, you put those bags on there, which is pre-COVID. And then during COVID, right, the isolation, the lack of being in those social environments, the challenges of now the families having to hold everything. It's hard to really put into words the challenges we're seeing. It's the economic, it's the racial injustices, right? We continue seeing it. So I would just say like what many people in the field are saying, which is we're dealing with the worst mental health crisis since World War II, right? And that's as a nation. So in our communities, especially our communities where we already have so much stress and trauma, right? And generational trauma, it's really hard. And our young people and families are yearning, right, for more and more supports. And at the same time, because of virtual and because of systems, right, they're not really built to be, I think the main thing, building a foundation of mental and emotional being for whatever organization, whatever company, whatever system, whatever school, right? It's really hard right now. So seeing the need, we're also seeing a lot of young people and families like really taking in their, you know, with our services, young folks are in our services every week with our schools, but then we are adding mindfulness for teachers, mindfulness for families, and people are engaging at higher levels. So I think people are also noticing like the need that maybe was there, but was hard to say. And so I think that's the only positive or optimistic I think I can say right now is like mental health might be having a reframe in the way it's called and what it feels like, right? So we're seeing it more as like an investment versus what we usually think in our communities is like, uh-oh, mental health, let me stick away from it.
Okay. And I just like to add to what you just said there. You know, we've unfortunately, you know, we've had trustees on our board who basically said, our kids aren't mentally ill. Why do we have these mental health services? And I'm hopefully that we can be reframing this so the community better understands just the impact of trauma and stress and COVID and all these things on our community. Cynthia, do you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, you know, we've actually been able to do is create more rapid response. I think that having resources that students, you know, obviously in a high school level, our biggest challenge is understanding what are the needs, right? And making sure the students have a voice and a choice in how to actually have access to those needs. And I think one of the things that we were able to do was really flip the switch on we need to increase services, but we also need to make them available a lot quicker, right? And we're not talking about students with IEP, which actually have their service minutes like actually, you know, kind of like tracked and make sure that it's happening. But students who traditionally might not look at services or families who traditionally have a stigma around services, especially mental health, it's how do we deconstruct that so the students can advocate for their needs. So I think one of the things that we really looked at is the challenge was there. And I think that's something that the other ED in the middle school, Mrs. Robinson and I really had looked at prior in February as a need in our school community. So this year we were able to incentivize students and making sure that they're able to do a self-assessment and say, do I want to do these services? What is the outcome? What is the benefit? Summit has mindfulness embedded throughout the day, not only in mentor time, but in every class, the first 5 minutes is mindfulness, which is a practice our students get better at, right? But all of a sudden, they're actually wanting to do those one-to-one check-ins, and they're wanting to have a community circle. So it is working. I think that those are some of the things like JG was talking about. We're pushing like a balance into reframing what this actually is. And just like we look at academics for our students, we're also looking at that, you know, the mental health need of our student in a more holistic way. So I think we, and, you know, with a lot of partners, BACRs in our school, we also have Seneca in our school. We can't do this alone. And I think this is why it's so important to keep these forums open and to keep doing these kind of ed fairs to support our communities, understanding where those resources are. So I'm super excited about, like, you know, just being here and sharing that space, because this is like a very important topic, but it's like, how do we help those families and students find those connections a lot quicker now?
Great, thank you so much. Let's move on to Joyce.
Yeah, I would echo what everyone has been saying. What we see mental health wise is that everyone is very stretched. teachers have very full plates and are juggling a lot because they're also trying to help the kids in their homes oftentimes. Our front office staff, very stretched. Our parents, we call them if their kids aren't logging into school. They didn't know, they have to work, they feel helpless. And then it's we're working with 12 to 14-year-olds, very social beings, very isolated right now. You know, being with each other is how their brains are supposed to be growing right now. And I think the isolation has been very impactful for a lot of them. We also know that COVID rates are high in San Pablo and Richmond. And so a lot of families have faced illness and the stress that that brings, especially if they have to seek medical care and insurance. Or just the fear. So we have, on top of what families already faced, now there's more trauma and more loss. We have kids who are talking with teachers about feeling down and anxious. One thing the district did this year that's been super helpful at our school is having homeroom every day. So one teacher has 25 kids that they're checking in with, and that's where we're getting a lot of our referrals for mental health services, because that's the first line, is that teacher that they trust and have built rapport with. And then our truancy rates are up. It's strange to call it truancy because there's a tech divide, there's all kinds of obstacles, but we see engagement to be a big challenge this year. Which contributes to the isolation and all the other outcomes. Yes.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Jen, can you add something to our conversation here?
I'm going to be brief because I think everyone has hit on all of these points. But maybe I'll just share briefly what we're hearing from families and young people. We're hearing my son or my daughter used to be engaged with school. They used to do well in school. Now they're not getting online. Parents are frustrated. Parents are asking, how can I best support my student to stay connected to school? As Joyce lifted up, our teachers are tremendously stressed. Many of them feel like that they were master teachers in the classroom. They have years and years of experience, and their strength is building caring learning communities that are rooted in relationship. And then they log on and they're looking at 35 blank screens. And for different reasons, young people aren't turning on their cameras. Teachers say, oh my goodness, I had this student in my class for an entire semester. If I bumped into him on the street, I wouldn't know him. He hasn't had his camera on. All of the things that have already been mentioned around financial stress. At the high school, a lot of young people, especially English language learners, are working now. So they might be working full-time or close to full-time and trying to keep up with school. We also have implemented this year for the first time in many, many years, a homeroom, and it has functioned in much the way that Joyce described as kind of like a touchstone, both for teachers and for young people. And that's been good. And I think there'll be an opportunity to talk more in a bit about the work actually that we're doing to respond to these needs. But I will say that that over our many years of serving our school community, one group that we've run every single year is a bereavement group for young people who've suffered a loss. And in my 23 years of doing this work, I have never, ever seen anything like the need for that support right now. So that, I think I will end with that. Thank you.
So thank you so much for lifting up that comment about the bereavement groups, as well as all the kids who are working right now. As I went around and talked to all the high school principals last spring, it was like so many kids have had to go to work and they're just gone. So that's a really important thing. Okay, so our next question is, what are some common misconceptions people have about school mental health services? And I'm going to start with you, Joyce.
I think one misconception is that mental health services is individual and group therapy, because it is, and we do offer that at our school. But it's also much broader than that. You know, it's especially right now, it's mentoring. It's helping kids to feel seen and heard and develop a sense of agency and efficacy and sense of who they are in the world. And that can be done through therapy. It can be done through groups, through enrichment, through sports, through any meaningful group that they can join. Anything that promotes that sense of belonging and learning about who they are and what they're capable of. And so, you know, at our community school model has all of those options, because not everyone will seek out therapy, but maybe they'll join BSU and find the support they need that way.
Okay, thank you. Cynthia, do you want to go next here?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we still see with a lot of parents and students in our community is that I have to be sick in order to seek mental health supports. And I think obviously for us at Summit, the mentorship program is a cornerstone of what we do, right? So it's first block, every student. So you go through that tier 1 support, but when students are struggling, you find them asking, well, this is going to cost me money. Is this going to be like, you know, am I going to have to miss class in order to have services? Are you saying that I have a mental illness? And they don't understand the benefit of actually creating systems of supports or coping skills or what we're trying to do. So I think we spend a lot of time demystifying that and kind of addressing those misconceptions so that they are able to engage. You know, what are people going to think of me if I attend services? And I think also the confidentiality and making sure that they understand that this is a confidential information, that, you know, they can do a self-referral, that you're 14, that you can seek services as well on your own. All of that is information that we try to just have available to combat those misconceptions.
Great, thank you. Jen, can you give us your perspective from El Cerrito High?
Yeah, again, I think Cynthia and Joyce really did a beautiful job of describing. I think I want to deepen into something Joyce mentioned. We make a distinction between therapy and therapeutic. Therapy is one way to be therapeutic, you know, individual counseling or group support. But there are many, many things that are therapeutic. And communities know this. Churches know this, and faith communities, athletic teams know this. When we come together in community and we care for one another, that's therapeutic. When we come together and we play games and we laugh and we connect and form friendships, all of those things are therapeutic. I think I heard Joyce mention the word belonging. We have a youth ELAC at El Cerrito High School, and we started in the fall offering tutoring, and not very many students were attending. And at this point, the group is growing and growing, and students are showing up who don't need any help with their work. They're showing up because it's a wonderful space to be in, where people connect and laugh. And it's almost, not quite, but almost like being together. And in contrast to the isolation that many young people have, they seek out these spaces if these spaces offer what it is they're looking for and what it is that they need, which are all of these things that have been mentioned. And then I'd also just wanted to underline what Cynthia mentioned around confidentiality and stigma. You know, there's so many ways to support wellness. When we're in our building, we had last year over 1,000 unique individual students who came into our space. They may have come in for some water or for some ice or for aspirin or to see a counselor or for a group. So when we're in the building, we feel like we have that pretty well mastered. In this new remote space, that's something we're working on. We're working on engaging with young people in ways that are destigmatizing and welcoming them into spaces often that are informal, that are rich in relationship, and that also can support them to solve problems they might be having with school, with teachers or academically. Or
That's great.
otherwise.
You know, I was at the El Cerrito High Youth Elac many times, and talk about a non-stigmatizing place. It was sensational. So thank you so much for that. Brenda, do you have something you'd like to add here?
Sure. I would say a common misconception would be that children don't experience mental health challenges or that it is a waste of time. I think we have to change the way we talk about mental health, right? There's a lot of stigma behind mental health. There's, I'm crazy, there's something wrong with me. So just, how can we phrase it in a way where mental health is for everyone, maybe changing, emotional wellness or just wellness or self-care. I know that's something we stress a lot at BBK. How are we taking, care of ourselves and making that kind of, in various ways, right? Mental health can be dancing, it can be exercising, it can be simply just, hanging out, bonding, knowing more about one another. So really changing the language.
Okay, thank you so much. Alexina from First Five, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I'd like to add kind of on both ends of the spectrum, the parents. So we've been running self-care creativity groups now for years at the center. And I would say that in our Zoom, our virtual world, we've had even stronger attendance because the parents, they need that support. And since they can't physically be in person with their social network, the Zoom self-care groups are sort of taking that place. And so we've seen tremendous support between, they're primarily mothers who are in the self-care groups, just the way they've been able to support each other with kind of their mental health concerns. And then I would also say on the young children's end, we also do a lot of mindfulness at the center. We're just going to be starting a Zoom mindful movement class on Saturdays, actually next Saturday. Yes. So, just it's never too early to start mindfulness with the children. So I wanted to echo what Brenda was saying. And so that is like the building blocks when children do start to experience trauma. If they do have those mindfulness strategies and already that outlook, then that's just one more kind of step towards them being able to address their mental health needs.
Thank you. So JG, you have personally worked and your staff has worked with so many kids in all these different schools. So tell us about common misconceptions people have about school mental health services.
Totally. I mean, I just want to echo just amazing words from everybody. I think the biggest thing is that when we say the words mental health, we automatically go towards like it's a problem versus where we are saying actually mental health can be positive, right? Could be actually healthy. And for us, that's really what we reiterate, right? As Alexina's mentioning, right? If we start with our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds and knowing that all their emotions can be welcomed, that can radically change the trajectory of a young person's life, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is like the good news, we have all these superstars, right? From the NBA players to singers and rap artists and musicians, they're all saying like mental health is actually something I invest in on a daily basis because it's just like physical health. If I want to actually get stronger or more in shape, I go and I walk outside, I go for a jog, I go to the gym. It's the same thing with mental health, right? If we want to get stronger in our mind, bodies, and heart, and really in our mental and emotional well-being, we just have to invest in it. I think the biggest misconception, though, is going back to the root, right? In Western healthcare, we went towards one way was the only way, right? In a very, very, psychological and, when we went that way, medicine, right? Medication. And we always say like medication can be very helpful and therapy can be very helpful, but let's not forget that there's things that create the whole person that we can invest in early on and keep pushing through that, because at the end of the day, mental health is just another part of our well-being. And how can we just invest in it both as a society, but individually, make sure the resources are out there. I think that's the biggest thing that happens, right? When we started Mindful Life Project, it was like, oh yeah, people, like we said, this is a practice that comes from people of color, right? And people are like, oh, but that's only for like white women, in Marin. Or like, actually, again, this comes from people of color and it's a practice that inherently all humans have. And we just have to keep on practicing together in it. So I think it's that decolonizing of the stigmas we have and making sure that our young folks are always in the lead. Because you can ask our young folks, they're like, yeah, mental and emotional well-being is a priority and I want to invest in all the time. I want all the resources. It's just us as adults sometimes pause that and stop that.
Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate those answers. And JG, thanks for lifting up about mental health is a good thing. So let's move on to our next question. What's the biggest challenge you're facing at the moment? And I'm going to go to Alexina to be first on this one.
So I think for us, since we went into shelter in place, we were not able to transition all of our participants to the virtual world. And so that's been frustrating because this is the time where our families need the support the most. And so we've had to be very creative. And I don't want to go into another question too early, but we've had to be creative around how can we still continue to maintain the connection with the families that we had going into shelter in place, and then also with new families, because since we don't have this physical building where families can just walk by or have a family refer their friend to come take classes with us, it's been a lot harder to let new families know about our programs. So we need to do a little bit better with our marketing and our networking, even with all of my colleagues here, of developing those relationships so that we can spread the word and let the families know, like, we are here to support families with young children.
Okay, thank you very much. Jen, do you want to talk to us about your biggest challenge right now?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Alexina. You're working with families in 0 to 5, and we're in high school. And yes, a very therapeutic aspect of our work over all of these years is physically our space. Our space is a sanctuary. People come in and they come in without an appointment, and they come in just because they like the feel of it, because they're welcomed, because they're greeted by name. There's so many things that happen in that space that are healing. And it's hard when you strip that away and you're left with what we're doing now, right in this moment. Connecting online. There's a lot of possibility here, and wonderful things happen in these spaces, and it's hard. When young people spend hours and hours every day online for school, to ask them, hey, do you want to connect with a counselor or a group or something fun and play games? They're like, do I have to look at a screen? I'm done looking at a screen. Or they might have connectivity issues. They might have a hotspot with unstable Wi-Fi. So I think it's all of the kind of the obvious challenges of this time are challenges that we're facing. And I think Alexina mentioned as well, creative, opportunities to be creative and invent new ways to be in relationship. And that is something that we are working on.
Thank you, Jen. JG, let's hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So we have our whole class push in mindfulness for every kid, every teacher program, which is Mindful Community. But our other one, which was the base, kind of the foundational flagship program, was Rise Up. And that was made for the kids who are having the hardest time with behaviors or just trauma in general, to have more integrative support with mindfulness, yoga, and expressive arts, performing arts. We would work with about 40, 50 kids at a school site. So I'd have to say our biggest challenge right now, and this is not just us, it's all the schools we work with and just across the country, is our kids with the most trauma and the families with the most stress and trauma are the ones who are having a really hard time, right? Just like always, right? Like this country's equity gap is so huge and it only gets really escalated in these times. And so for our kids who need the most mental and emotional well-being support, they're having the hardest time. Either they don't have enough support system to get on the actual sessions or the Wi-Fi connectivity, or maybe they are having to take care of younger kids in the household, right? Instead of jumping in, and all of it's so complex. So it's really reaching the kids who have the biggest needs. I think our schools are trying to be innovative, but it's at the same time, it's so challenging. And that's where our hearts break, right? We know the families, we're trying to innovate. We're trying to make sure we provide those sessions for families too, to really make sure they're engaged in it. But definitely the most in need families and community members are the ones who are having the hardest time. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, in general for all of us in education.
Okay, thank you. Joyce, how about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thoughts aren't different than JG or Jen. It's the same. We're really struggling getting kids engaged and through no fault of their own. You know, kids who have a therapist don't always log in for their appointments online. Groups that were very popular on campus will have 2 or 3 kids show up on a Zoom. You know, part of it may be managing a schedule and knowing the time in the day, or the connectivity, or the numerous stressors that can, you know, change a plan on a dime. So keeping kids engaged and visible and has been really hard.
Let me ask a quick follow-up there, Joyce. You mentioned like some of the groups that had been very popular, attendance is way down. How do you feel that impacts the effectiveness of that group, or the anonymity of people's feelings, or just how that affects the group?
We'll see. I'm thinking of like our Rainbow Alliance and our Black Student Union. I run a stress management group, and that's been pretty well attended. But a lot of the ones around identity and belonging, and they're important to the culture of our school. And I don't know what happened. I don't know. We're losing momentum. I think kids are missing out. Our 7th graders don't even know each other yet. Like, they're just meeting for the first time in these groups. I think when we do reconvene in person, we're going to really have to invest in spending time and getting kids to meet each other and be together, and reintroduce these groups and more.
Really important point. Thank you. Cynthia, what can you add to our conversation?
Yeah, I think just very much like Jen, I think the social piece of connecting, you know, we have self-referrals now and students are doing that, but then the shyness or even like the discomfort of meeting a new person or like talking to somebody that they're not quite clear on who they are, it's a barrier. And you know, teachers had the same like kind of barrier as they get new teachers this year. That took a lot of work for students to start talking or start responding or even come on camera. And I think with counseling services or any therapeutic services, it's even harder because it's like a once a week or twice a week or a group. And that has been a challenge. Establishing the relationship has been, I think, the biggest challenge that we're facing. And it's to the point of like, well, let's see if one of the deans will come in and reintroduce all of you, and finding an additional adult to take the pressure off the students in coming into this space, or even, you know, to kind of build that relationship. So we've made a lot of pivots, but that has definitely been a really big challenge that usually don't even question, because the student comes in, meets the person, whether they establish a relationship, at least they know who they're talking to. But the Zoom experience is very isolating and definitely still very much like, you know, our students are feeling really uncomfortable about sharing about what's happening with somebody that they just don't have a relationship with.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Brenda.
Well, I could say we've been very blessed to continue to offer our services online. Everything is via Zoom, but even that, we have some parents who are not tech savvy. And also, there's only so much that you can do online. So just being creative about, what we're going to talk about, what activities we can do. But we've been able to connect with a lot of people. We've had a lot of guest speakers. We've had psychologists, therapists, and so that I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge is just planning ahead. I'm like thinking of putting together some field trips, and I'm like, is it going to be online? Is it going to be in person? So just the uncertainty of yeah, that would
Okay.
be.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, we'll move on to our 5th question. What are some of the ways our current reality has caused you to innovate in your work? And Cynthia, would you like to go first on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that we've done is kind of listen to our students, right? We do a lot of surveys around what can we change in the school and the school community. But listening to them, and I think one of the first things we did is like, how do we make this a quicker response or a more rapid response? And we've, been able to do that through a lot of supports of students, establishing student government. So student government has a whole group of students with various supports who are leading. They're actually putting together a mental health fair. So they reached out to partners. So giving them the opportunity to lead this work has also allowed people to start talking about like, hey, what are you doing for self-care? Hey, what are you doing for like, did you actually practice this mindfulness? You have teachers bringing in like, additional resources and sharing it out with students. We share out mindfulness resources in the newsletter for self-care. So I think that in itself has asked for us to be a lot quicker in the way that we respond to feedback, but seek a lot more feedback in terms of, is this actually working? So we've been very lucky. Like I said, we're a very small community in terms of the amount of students that we serve. So that also has allowed those relationships that have already been built because kids are used to having a mentor. For new ninth graders and new seventh graders, I think that we've done a lot of activities. Like, we have assemblies and we have different activities that we can do. We do community circle and times as well to build those connections. Because that's always been the challenge. I think a lot of people said it. New students don't even know each other. I think Joyce was talking about seventh grade, and I totally commiserate because they don't know each other at all. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Brenda.
What are some of the ways our current reality? I mean, the obvious one, right? Offering everything online. Every year we offer a health and wellness summer program. And so last year was the first year that we did it online. We uploaded pre-recorded videos, hoping that people would watch them, made them available on our social media pages. And even though that was different and new, it was pretty cool. So yeah, I feel like I'm jumping into the next question, but.
Okay, that's fine. Alexina, how about you?
Okay, so how have we innovated? So the obvious one that everyone did is we transferred everything onto Zoom. However, our parent-child interactive classes, they don't translate directly from this experiential class where children are playing with homemade Play-Doh and blocks and everything. It doesn't really translate to the Zoom world when you're talking about infants through 5-year-olds. So we have had to rethink how we offer our classes and put a little bit more of a parent ed spin to it. So, having activity kits that the parents can pick up before the class. So they have something that their child can do while the instructor is having more of a one-on-one conversation with the parent. So our classes have shifted a little bit more to parent education, while still finding a way to have parent-child interactive classes, activities like story times, and some movement and music and movement during the classes, because we also have to be cautious around screen time. I mean, we're always like, no screen time for children up through 2 years. And then it's like, come take a Zoom class with your 1-year-old. So it's a little bit, so we've had to make it make sense. And thank God our instructors have been pretty creative. And so I feel like that is going well, and we're always looking, to fine tune that. And so we're also looking for other ways. As I was saying earlier, not all of our families moved with us into the Zoom world, and yet they're still center families and they still have some needs. So we've done a couple rounds of what we call COVID calls, where we came up with a list of questions and we physically called almost 200 families at 2 different points during shelter in place. So in the spring, in the late spring, and then we just finished up with another round in December. And we just checked in with our families. What do you need? How can we support you? We were really fortunate to have funding for gift cards that we were able to provide for the families that were showing that they had a financial loss due to lowered work hours or a loss of work completely. And we are finding that there's a lot more funding actually happening in our communities. A lot of grants are being offered for nonprofits. So you've probably seen that there are gift cards that are available or rental assistance. And so we're trying to tap into those resources so that we can then provide them to our families. And a lot of our families, just by getting the call, they're so appreciative. Thank you for thinking about us. Even though we haven't been to your center in 6 months, thank you for thinking about me and remembering that, I was a part of your center. And we're hoping that this might re-energize some families to then reconnect. And so we've also, thinking about resources, we've thought, how can we connect resources to other programming? So we've offered nutrition classes and we've been able to provide groceries. So the families will come and they'll pick up the groceries and then they'll do the nutrition class. Or some of our literacy parent education classes, we've been able to get donations of books or toys. And so really it's thinking, how can we leverage our relationships with other partners and with new funding sources to kind of do the best of both worlds. So to provide support, educational support to the families, while also providing resources at the same time.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for raising up, like we all know, like there's nothing like reaching out to somebody and calling them that like really helps build a relationship. Joyce, could you go next on this, please?
Sure. When things first closed in March, we have an international academy, so about 100 families who are new to the country. In asking and checking in with how they were doing, there was a panic and a real financial stress. So we've gotten in the habit of asking and then trying to respond in real time. So at that time, we raised a bunch of money as a school site and did some rapid relief before the other systems kicked in. And then this year, as school has started, our big problem is with engagement. And so just from the very beginning, doing our information night and back to school night with parents and an orientation, learning right away that there was a huge digital divide. Parents had a very hard time doing online forms. So we changed up how we did some things. We hired a part-time family engagement specialist who's bilingual. She's from the community. She works evening and afternoon hours, and she helps parents get online and offer whatever support that they need. We hired a half-time social worker to do similar type of work. We have a partnership with a mentoring agents organization, and their mentoring really pivoted and changed. And we use that person now to help find the kids that we haven't seen. So he's doing safe distance home visits to lay eyes on a kid and see what is it that you need to come back to school to engage with us. So these are roles that, we've always had the social worker, but we haven't had the family engagement specialist. Our mentor worked very differently. So we've tried to pivot to respond to the crisis at hand.
Great, thank you. Jen, could you talk about this a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So let's see, in terms of innovations, for us, we work with young people in high school. Typically, we work mostly directly with them. We get our referrals from young people, in pre-COVID times. So one new aspect of our work is much more contact with parents and guardians than we had in the past, which is a good thing. We are all of our staff and our interns are learning new skills. We're learning how to play all kinds of games online. We put a lot of our infrastructure is now online. Gone are the days of the big fat filing cabinets full of paper files. And that was a kick in the butt that we needed. We're pushing into classrooms more. And we're also tapping, as was mentioned earlier, we're tapping our community partners in new ways. So we are working with Richmond Revolution. We're doing a group that's just starting up a week from tomorrow for Black youth around Afro futures. And we have a graduate of El Cerrito High School, who's also a recent graduate of Howard, who is leading this group. We had a group of Black alumni come and do a panel for our teachers so that our teachers could hear directly from them what it was like to be Black and be a student at El Cerrito High School and to be in their classrooms. And it was a very powerful experience, and teachers want to do better and they want to wake up. And so we're supporting that kind of work as well through partnerships in the community with activist organizations, with young people, so that they can bring some of their insight and some of their energy both to our teachers directly through their reflections, and also creating and holding spaces for young people to join that work.
That's great. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next question, but I'm understanding from our people running the session that we're getting a lot of questions from some of the participants or some of the people who are watching our presentation. So I'm going to ask us to be trying to keep our answers to about 1 minute now, as we try and move through the rest of our questions and get to some of those that came from the audience. Okay, so what learnings do you imagine will stick around after distance learning? And JG, I'd like you to go on that one.
I think our biggest hope, right, is that going back to like social justice and mental and emotional well-being should be the foundation of any of our ecosystems, right? And if we haven't been hit hard enough over the last year to keep being reminded of this, I don't know what to say, right? I think we're at a point where as a society, we lead the globe in stress, right? And a lot of what the research showed early on before COVID, right, was that we have more stress-induced hospitalizations in this country percentage-wise compared to any other country. We live in a systemically oppressed way, right? We live where our systems are built to really kind of just focus on one part of a being. And so my biggest hope is that when we come out of this, we really dive into transformative work that happens with our communities, by our communities, and is led by our young people, right? And I think when we come back into schools, everyone's pushed on this, right? The relationships are where things matter. And we know that our schools have to be truly anti-racist places where young folks can really feel that deep sense of belonging, not just in individual classrooms, but in the whole ecosystem. So that's the biggest hope and dream that we can take out of this really tough time.
Thank you, JG. And you know, it's interesting that we have such a powerful movement for anti-racism going on right now, coincident with the COVID crisis, and the two obviously weren't related, but it's like, it's an opportunity, a really interesting opportunity to make progress, significant progress on both fronts. Joyce, could you go next, please?
Yeah, I would echo everything JG has said. I think we will hopefully keep connection as a priority. And I don't mean internet connection, but really human connection and belonging and care, a sense of real care. We've tried to develop habits about asking and listening and then building together. And I hope those continue so that we can have more transformed schools. And then, you know, just as a side, some kids have done better in distance learning. And I hope that we still can offer lots of choices. And maybe that can be a byproduct, but for kids that can choose it and do well, it's nice to have options and maybe include people online and in person.
Okay, thank you so much. Cynthia, could you go next, please?
Yeah, I think one of the things that for us, and it's, you know, kind of one of the questions, we have a Q&A there that's similar. What is that positive thing? I think it's the rapid response is having student leadership supporting in the work of destigmatizing mental health, really looking at mental health as the same way that we would look at our students' academics and having a plan. But it's like that healthy development and making that not only one of the, like the 16, we have 16 habits of success, but not one of the 16 habits of success, but a real foundation of, you know, of building our student and building leaders who can cope, right? We know that COVID came pretty quickly and out of nowhere, but that is, for us, one of the biggest things that we are taking away from this is that we need to be able to respond, but we also need to be able to give students and our faculty the coping skills to address challenges and address trauma. We definitely have invested a lot more on professional development around trauma-informed practices for our teachers, and also circle work for our teachers, because we do a lot of that for students. So how are we really supporting our teachers is at the forefront of like the work that we focused on this year. So professional development around those practices has also been very supportive. And I think it's something that we know that there's a need that will continue for years to come.
Thank you so much for that. Alexina, so what changes do you think will be sticking around at First Five after distance learning time?
I believe Joyce or Jen mentioned just having options for families. So we have found that some families who never came to the center in the past because they were so busy or didn't have transportation, they're able to access our programming. And so we want to now realize, like, okay, there are different ways that we can work with our families. And I have to say, like, a lot of my team was not very technologically advanced 10 months ago. And so we really have hit a learning curve. And so I feel like, I think our brains are just more fluid right now because we have to be so innovative. So I think even just that in and of itself, I think tapping into our creative space, that is something that I'm hoping will continue through as, when we do go back into like the real physical world, there's still so much work. It's not like business as usual. And so we have to think, how are we going to transition ourselves and our families back into the work that we do?
Okay, that was great. Thank you so much. Brenda, could you go next, please?
Yes, I just want to echo what Alexina said, just having those options for families, doing in-person programming and also, programming via Zoom. I think also just, continuing to having, open conversations about, racism, about oppression, about systems change, about self-care, about wellness, maybe starting some podcasts, that we can continue to just, build with the community. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Jen, how about your comments on this?
Again, I'm going to echo what has already been said. I want to underline that fascinating piece that I think Joyce was the first to mention, that for some of our students, a smaller subset, but a significant number of students, this is working for them. They might have social anxiety or other kinds of anxieties that make navigating the building difficult, and being at home has been just fine for them. So I echo that call to continue that as an option for some students. On an altogether different level, I want to underline that this challenging time has also, I think, stripped many of us bare. And what that looks like is a kind of tenderness that I've never seen in my career, where people come into spaces more willing to be vulnerable, more willing to listen, and open to problem solving in ways that I didn't see before. So I'm hopeful that we can carry that forward. I also want to underline that a silver lining of this time has been expanded opportunity for teachers and faculty and staff to come together to learn and to prioritize the most important changes that need to happen. And without a doubt, over generations, that has been around structural racism. And we're having those conversations in our school building around equitable grading by department, looking at who is doing well and who isn't doing well, and not putting blame or locating blame in the bodies of those young people, but rather looking at how do our systems function to push some people away from success and to bring other people in. And so we're having very substantive, meaningful conversations that I'm hopeful and I want to say I'm certain will carry forward.
Thank you very much for those comments. That was great. Okay, well, moving on to question 7. What practical advice would you like to offer to parents and caregivers? So Alexina, let's have you go first on this one.
So this advice I can give because it applies to me as well as a parent. And and JG mentioned this, it's all about relationships right now. So we are with our children and our families at this point 24/7. And we're grappling with all these new responsibilities and new stresses and feelings of like, I can't be my child's teacher. I don't understand these math problems. I can't juggle this child and that child. You know, it's just sort of like crazy making. And so our relationships, I think to a degree, are suffering. There's more strife in the house. We're losing patience with our children and our family members. And I think also, you know, again, speaking for myself, there's this stress and this pulling of, well, I want my child to succeed. I don't want them to lose out on a whole year worth of learning. And yet they're stressed out and I'm struggling, and sometimes I'm arguing with my child because they don't want to do the Zoom class, they don't want to do their homework, and which causes me to get upset. And so I have to pull back, and I hear the experts saying, the mental health experts, the psychologists saying, it's okay, they're going to be okay. When they go back to school, within a couple of months, they're going to catch up. And so right now, this is the time to be really like gentle with our children. I mean, we have to be gentle with ourselves, but we need to be gentle with our children. We need to have empathy. This is not fun for them. If it's not fun for us, how can we think it's fun for them? And they're bored, even if like, yeah, they get to watch a lot more television than they ever did in their whole little lives. They're bored. You know, and Zoom classes are not fun for them. I know teachers are trying. I give so many blessings to teachers, but it's really tough. And so we have to just boil it down again to the relationship and give each other grace and use our mindfulness to calm ourselves down. And just at the end of the day, kind of like have our hearts connect to our children's hearts and be like, how can I be here for you? And yeah, we do have to hold some line, some homework has to be done, some Zoom classes need to be attended to, but we need to be a little bit more willing to be flexible, because it's a lot easier to catch up and learn math problems than to try to undo traumatic relationships that may be evolving simply because of COVID and because of what we're facing right now. So we have to look at the bigger picture of let's just get out of this healthy.
So thank you so much for that. And you raised up two things. One I'll mention right now is like bored. I mean, like, it's like amazing how I think kids are stepping up. I mean, I have two adult sons who are on the spectrum, and they have been like so forgiving, so, you know, like, oh, I'm not doing anything today. My Lord, it's just been amazing. So thank you so much for being so vulnerable there and talking about that. Cynthia, could you go next on this one, please?
Yeah, I think my pro tip is ask for help. As caregivers and as parents, there's that responsibility of always having to hold it all together or put it all together or not show weakness or vulnerability. Ask for help. I think one of the things that I really appreciate in my workspace is that we personalize the experience to the students. And I hear, like, you know, and totally echo, you know, like Alexandra just saying, well, you know, like sometimes I'm fighting with my child, and I'm fighting with my child and I don't want to fight with my child to make him do something. Have that conversation, right? There might be that like pause that you need, or that reset, or that rah-rah meeting that needs to happen for your student to like feel supported, and somebody to explain to him, why does this matter? Why does me taking AP Calc when I'm not even sure how I'm going to do in the AP matter right now, right? But to caregivers, ask for help. I think there's a lot of supports and services in our school communities that parents sometimes just didn't hear about it, don't know about it, don't know how to get their child connected to it. And your teachers and your administrators are the best resources for caregivers right now, because like we have that information readily available. So don't hesitate to ask for help. And there's not a vulnerability, there's not a shame into that. is being human and have grace for yourself. I think that's really what I can say.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. Jen, how about if you go next on this?
I don't think I could say it any better than Cynthia or Alexina. To prioritize wellness, to prioritize relationship, to be gentle with our children. I heard to have our hearts connected, Alexina said, have our hearts connected to their hearts. And to know that I think it's important when we feel ourselves getting dysregulated, when we feel ourselves getting amped up, to take a breath and to maybe even to take a moment to step aside. And when we see ourselves getting drawn into familiar, non-productive kinds of dynamics, to pause. And I think beautiful things can happen when we're able to pause. And it's a practice and it's difficult, but the rewards are tremendous. And I think the rewards of creating a pause or a space are that possibility comes in, right? So that when we do things differently, it allows for the possibility of different outcomes. And I definitely think that it's time to be gentle with our students. And when we push hard and they push back harder, that's not necessarily going to get any of us where we want to be. So yes, give grace to ourselves, give grace to our children.
Okay, thank you. JG, can you give us some new perspective here or additional
No, I mean,
perspective?
everyone's saying such incredible things that are so important. And as a parent, I can resonate with all of them, right? I have a 6th grader here at school here in Richmond and a 3rd grader. I try to say mental and emotional health before anything else, right? And that's not just for the students. That's for the mom, the abuelita, whoever it is, right? Like, we have to remember what everyone said right now is so important, but so hard also, right? Like, what about mental emotional health when I can't pay my bills or I don't have a house to live in, or, we have to understand those stresses are there, but in relationship, it's really important right now that those pauses happen and the why is there, right? Cynthia, I so much agree with you. I think that a lot of times you say, you just got to do it. You got to go on that Zoom just because you have to. So I think those conversations about the why, both for mental and emotional well-being, and also for all those parents out there. I was a 6th grader who went to Mexico to live on a beach for 6 months while my parents did art. I didn't have any teacher. My parents are artists, no disrespect to them, but they weren't teaching me anything. I did independent studies. And then in high school, I went to Argentina for 6 months, lived with my family down there, with my abuelita and all my family down there. And guess what? The teachers went on strike for 6 months. So, and then I became a 3rd grade teacher in Richmond. So remember that yes, academics are important, but nothing is more important than the mental and emotional well-being of a young person. And for yourselves, we can only pass the oxygen mask on to others when we have the oxygen mask on ourselves. So take care of yourselves, mind, body, and heart every day.
Okay, thank you so much. Joyce, let's get your thoughts on this.
I could be quick, just amen. Everyone has said it really beautifully. We have to be gentle with ourselves, our children, people we work with, and remember that a bad grade is not a bad thing. I mean, we can't, the fact that we've tried to normalize this and still use grades and attendance metrics and think it's okay is crazy. So if kids are having a bad year, academically, it's okay. And all of their feelings are okay. That's all.
Great, thank you. Brenda, any final comments on this topic?
I would say just engage in conversation, ask questions, have a question of the day, continue to nurture that connection and that communication. Surround yourself around positive people, listen to positive things, positive podcasts, and just, do things that make you happy, be creative. I think this has been like the time to really explore creativity. So just continuing to motivate that.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay, we're moving on to question number 8 now. And actually our panelists have a choice on this one. It's either what is the one thing you wish people knew about your work, or what is being left out? What are we missing? So I think I would like Cynthia to go first on this one.
I think I'm going to go with what are we missing? I think we need to really talk about the partnership that parents are co-educators this year, and make sure the parents understand that the resources are there and available. So reaching out to your child's teacher, to the admin, but see that role and validate that role for yourself, because you guys are not only the caregiver, but you're that co-teacher this year. So whatever, kind of observation you're having on your child's class or like opinion, you're learning math again. Like I have parents that are like, well, I heard this teacher say this and I have no idea where this is coming from. And so you're getting that education as you're also trying to work from home, or you're walking in from work and you see your child. So validate that feeling. I really do think, like Brenda said, and do not normalize. Like COVID is not normal. Living in a pandemic and working in a pandemic is not normal. Don't normalize it. But I think that, like, the parent as that co-teacher is something that we have not addressed enough. And I feel like it's something that we need to keep striving to give parents more supports to make sure that they also feel adequately equipped to support their student. We talk about, like, back to school nights and all of these other things that we've done, but a lot of our parents are not also educators. So it's really hard for them to feel successful at home with their child. So just keep advocating for parents to keep reaching out for supports.
That was great. Thank you so much. Joyce, could you go next on this one, please?
I think one thing I would want parents to know is that, like Cynthia said, we all really want to partner with parents. We want to hear your needs, your struggles, your ideas, your solutions. We really want to do it together and not on top of parents and families, but side by side, and make sure it's responsive. So the more information you can provide, reaching out is super important. And in that sense, I know during COVID, there's been a lot of surveys and there's a fatigue around it, but I just want to make a plug that parents provide really important information. And at this time, especially, people are listening. Schools in the district are listening. So please share your knowledge and hopes with us.
Great, thank you. Brenda, could you go next, please?
I would just say, we're still here, still offering services. Everything is free. I think building blocks for kids sometimes can be misleading, where we offer services for the whole family, not just children. And just, we're not just doing this work right now for the pandemic. We've always been here. And so just really motivating families to take advantage of the services.
Okay, thank you very much. Jen, could you go next, please?
Once again, I'm just going to echo those who came before me, Brenda and Joyce and Cynthia. We're here. Please reach out to us for support. Like Joyce underlined, we are oriented toward partnership, partnering with families, problem solving, extended conversations, connecting families with resource in the community. If that might be financial resource, rent support, it might be help for a young person who's coming out or who's transitioning their gender identity. We are well connected. And so things that might feel overwhelming for a family, especially at this time, we can work together in ways that ease that sense of overwhelm. We have families say to us, I don't feel so alone anymore. That is our goal. We are well resourced and ready to respond and to be in relationship. So I think that would be my last word.
That's great. Thank you so much on that. JG, how about your thoughts on this?
I think I have to go more general science side. I think that it's really important for everyone to know that chronic stress, trauma, what it really does is hijacks the brain. So the back of your brain, which is that fight, flight, freeze response system, is going to get hijacked and become stronger. And we're living in a time where the emotions that arise, the thoughts that arise, the spreading thin is really just perfect storm for that back of the brain to be hijacked, right? So cortisol, adrenaline is probably pretty often happening. I know a lot of families, parents and kids aren't sleeping well, right? I think a lot of people are coming to me and saying my emotions are really taking over, right? That all of that can be countered. And it really is about investing in yourself and reaching out, right? Making sure that you use your resources. There's so many of us out here in West Contra Costa and beyond, right? But that it is, that's what happens. The brain gets hijacked. And in order for us to get to where we can be human, to be responsive and not reactive, to be caring, to be compassionate, it will take that science of daily gratitude. I really recommend doing this with your kids. Like even this time, start with gratitude in the morning, maybe at the dinner table, whatever it is, making sure that you're sending love and compassion to yourself often, right? As well as your kids and your families. And always taking those pauses to focus on the breath, to focus on what you're feeling and welcoming it all, because this is a perfect storm to really take us into emotional and mental health turmoil. And so let's lean on each other and be there for each other in a way that we can really counter it, because it's tough times.
Thanks so much. Alexina, how about your thoughts here?
Sure. So I'd like to extend what JG was saying. I really would like to uplift self-care. So I feel like my role in the panel tonight is really to, both as a professional in the field and as a parent who is going through this, and I know there are other parents on the panel, but I totally get feeling hijacked. I totally get, my brain feeling hijacked as I'm trying to juggle all these multiple roles each day. And so it's so important for us to make time for the self-care. It's something that we talk about a lot at our center with the parents. And I find that I'm not even able to do it very much. It was hard enough to find time or to prioritize it prior to shelter in place. And now it feels next to impossible, because it sort of feels like, there's no escape. You're with your family or whoever you live with, like, where are you going to go? You have to take them with you if you have young children. So you're sort of like, they're stuck to you at all times. And so how do you find the time to do self-care, and what type of self-care works for you? Something very small that I do, I love music. I have my internet radio on my phone with me. Everywhere I go in my house, I'm listening to music. That is something really small that doesn't take away from my attention from my children or from my job. It's something that it's uplifting me and just giving me a little bit of something else in the moment. And so whatever it is, if it means that you actually get dressed for the day instead of being in your sweatpants, if you take that extra 10 minutes to make that batido, the smoothie, if it's just like, look, I am going to take these 15 minutes and I am going to go on a walk, if it's by myself or with my children, but it's getting myself out of the daily routine, whatever it is. And so I just cannot stress it enough to find something, no matter how small it is, to do self-care, because that resilience is what we need to keep us moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And for Brenda, once again, what's the one thing you wish people knew about your work, or what's being left out? What are we missing?
I already answered.
Oh, you already answered that one. Okay, I am so sorry. Okay, so now we're coming to our last question. Alexina so sagely said a couple of questions ago, being gentle with ourselves. Alexina, let me just ask you, did you actually just answer this question with your music, or is it?
I thought you meant to answer one or the other of the last two questions.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Fine. Okay, so other panelists, I'm going to ask you all, what's your favorite thing to do for self-care? And try and keep it to 2 minutes or less on this one, okay? So we're going to start with Cynthia.
One of the things I think I've done for self-care is actually read a lot of mindfulness books. It's really hard for me to, and just personal health, it's hard for me to stay still. I think as educators, we're always so constantly moving. And it's really funny because obviously I work for Summit and we do mindfulness every meeting, every morning with the students. So I tell the kids, I also struggle just to like be gentle with myself. So if you guys have not read it, it's called My Grandmother's Keeper. No, My Grandmother's Hand. And it's really all around exercises around self-care. So I'm trying them. And a lot of like just sitting in the sun. I try to move a lot during the school day. So just sitting outside and sitting in the sun and taking that meeting instead of Zoom and a phone call, and going for that walk, which is really important because obviously we're getting a lot less exercise and we can Zoom all day long. There's 15,000 meetings for administrators and we're like, wait, what just happened? Our days like, are super long. But yeah, so it's worked. It's working.
Okay, great. Jen, could you go next, please?
I do a lot of self-care. My wife says I do tremendous amount of self-care. My new very favorite thing, which is bordering on an obsession, is I've never been a swimmer in my life and I've never liked cold water ever. And I decided to write a news story and I'm swimming in the bay almost every day. And so, I started in the summer without a wetsuit and a neighbor lent me a wetsuit and now I'm wearing a wetsuit. But no matter how awful you feel, and I can feel pretty awful. Cold water is a very, very revitalizing. And I would say that if that feels like a reach, then at the end of your shower, let it run cold even for 30 seconds. And I think it will improve your mood. That's my 2 bits.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Joyce, how about if we hear from you now?
I also have been learning the hard way that you can't go from Zoom to Zoom. And so I'm trying to schedule meetings, 50-minute meetings instead of hours. So I can take a quick walk, go outside, do a lot of deep breathing exercises. And my latest and favorite self-care is the Warriors are back. And so those, I have something to look forward to, watch their schedule, and that's a good, fun escape and makes things feel almost normal for those couple hours.
Okay, thank you. Brenda, tell us what you're doing for self-care.
I like to do a few things. I love nature, so whenever I can, I try to get some walk out in nature. I also do painting. Here's a picture of a painting. It's been really fun and therapeutic. I also just like to do my makeup, and even though I'm just here at home, that makes me feel better. And I love dancing. So yeah, I just try to do all of that when I can.
Okay, thank you so much. And JG, tell us about you and self-care.
Well, after teaching it, for 8 years and doing everything but taking care of myself, I learned the hard way. And, obviously I would be ridiculous. You're all like, you better say mindfulness, obviously. And for me, it's when the kids go to sleep, my wife's in bed, right? So it's like 10:30, 10:45 at night, 20, 30 minutes of stillness practice. And I also think it's really important to remember to invest in the heart and the body. So I run every day, which has happened, fortunately, before pandemic. I'm on a little run streak going on like 385 days in a row. And it doesn't have to be long, right? Just getting out there. And last but not least is figuring out something that is good for my self-compassion and compassion for others on a daily basis. So if it's saying something extra kind to someone, or just reminding someone how great they are, or shouting myself out for dealing with a lot of hurdles and honoring that I have resilience, right? So those are the 3 ways every day I try to cultivate self-care.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate everybody's answers to these, and Brenda, so much for sharing your painting. That was terrific. Okay, so now we're going to take questions from our audience, and we've already received some questions via chat and via the application. But if you want to ask a question in the chat now, you can either press the raise your hand button or you can do it in the Q&A. So those are more ways for you to submit questions, but we have some questions in already. So we're going to start with those. And I think some of them, I'm looking at through some of them. I may just ask a few people about others. I think maybe I'll ask the whole crew about. And if I say I'm going to cut it off and somebody else wants to add something, please just let us know what you're thinking, okay? So here's one. As a mother, I really focus on the well-being of my child, and I often think about educators and social workers. What additional resources are they receiving right now? So I'm going to start with Joyce on this one and see if there's something you want to, something you can answer here.
I think it depends. I think, as Jen said, we're all very tender at the moment. And so our faculty meetings at the school have been very kind to teachers. We've brought in lots of resources and strategies and supports to help them feel appreciated and empowered. And then we have a care team of a lot of mental health providers, and we spend the first 20 minutes of our meetings checking in with each other. I think, and I hope those stay, we really are caring a lot about each other as colleagues. But yes, I appreciate the participant pointing out that we worry about our teachers and providers. They're stretched. They've had to learn a lot. Many times they're teaching blank screen. It's hard, and but we're trying to cultivate a real culture of caring right now, and I hope that sustains and continues.
Okay, thank you. Jen, can you add something to that?
I think, yeah, I'll piggyback on what Joyce said. Over a number of years, I've run a mindfulness group for teachers that has now, we met straight through the summer when there was no school. We met over the break. Teachers and other staff look for spaces where they can share honestly about their experience, where they don't have to put up a front, because they often do feel like they have to put up a front, especially with parents. Teachers want to show up strong. They want to show up capable and beautiful. They don't always feel that way. So when we create spaces to take care of them and to be in relationship, to create intimate, vulnerable spaces, I think those are very healing. And like Joyce said, all of our meetings at the James Morehouse Project, well, not all of them, but enough of them each week include time for people to check in and say, hey, this is what's happening with my children. This is what's happening with my family. And so when we're allowed to bring our full humanity into a space, I think we're able to access all of our available resource more ably than when we feel like we have to somehow hide or not be honest about where we are. And so I appreciate that question also. And I do think that as difficult as this time is for all of us, it has created opportunities for connection that didn't exist before. And so I am hopeful that we carry those forward.
Okay, thank you very much about that. Cynthia, how about your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have really worked on is not only reducing the work week for our teachers, taking into consideration that they're actually working from home, so providing a stipend for teachers for remote work as well, and really putting emphasis on self-care. Obviously, Summit works a little bit different because we have a take what you need policy for teachers and for everyone. So it's a little bit different than unionized workers. But I think one of the things is like really getting to understand, do you need that day off, and making sure that they feel empowered to take the time if they need the time, and working with them, right? Working to hear what the concerns are, showing up in spaces where they're teaching to kind of promote like, hey guys, I haven't seen you in forever. Come on camera, how's it going? And the kids usually will respond, because if the principal shows up, it's different. They're like, oh, Cynthia's here, we're all gonna have to show up. But I think it's also being supportive, right? And sometimes just listening. Sometimes they just need to be listened to, and that's okay. They're not asking for anything. They're just trying to vent their frustration, because this is the community they got. This is who they see every single day when they're not sharing space with families or friends. So just being in community with each other, but really being very supportive around the flexibility around the schedule actually has helped our teachers kind of cope with these changes.
Great, thank you for that. Alexina, can you, do you have any thoughts to add here?
For my team, my instructors, similar to what Cynthia's saying, is I allow a lot of flexibility, because at the end of the day, and I've heard this from a lot of mental health therapists, and I also know the reality, you cannot work full-time and parent full-time at the same time in the same place. It's just not possible. And so, to our viewers, our families, whether the parents are working in a job at home, or if they're in the home and they're working on whatever needs to happen in the home, it's the same, because typically we don't have to do this work with our children at the same time. So it's just, it's not realistic to think that we can get all of this work done during this time. And so I am fortunate that I have some flexibility where I can lessen my instructors' class load, and I can give them a lot of grace. All of my teachers have young children. So I'm really just staying in touch with them and making sure, are you okay? How is it going? How can I support? And when they come to me and say, well, I need this time off for X, Y, and Z because of my child, it's like, yeah, no problem. So we have to, we have to be really respectful and nurturing to our participants. And we also need to do the same for our staff.
Great, thank you. Okay, so JG and then Brenda, I'm going to go to you with the same question. It's really about what kind of additional resources and services are we providing for our service providers now?
Yeah, 100%.
JG first, yeah.
Thanks, Tom. We focused when the whole pandemic started in March. We were like, okay, we do our kids centered programming. Now we got to make sure teachers and school staff also receive a 30-minute mindfulness session a week. And then we also have to get our families a Spanish and English session once a week. And I think the biggest thing that often happens is, like, most people who are service, oriented or who are teachers, educators, we're givers first. And unfortunately, we do that to a level that oftentimes burns us out. And so really, really focusing on, like, hey, as a staff, like, can you guys pause? Can you give more space? Hey, everyone, as a community, can we really just stop the go for a second and figure out ways to kind of change things up, because it is relentless right now with all the meetings, with all the surveys, with everything. It's like, how do we slow things down? And it's ironic because we're all still at home, right? We're just a lot of times still at home, but things are more busy and faster paced. So it's, how do we really get that circuit pause as much as often for everyone involved in the ecosystem?
Great. Brenda, your thoughts here?
Yeah, so at BBK, we incorporate wellness days into our work. So we do it as staff and also individually. We also have a 4-day work week. So most of us are off on Fridays. That's super nice. But yeah, the wellness days, I really appreciate their days to just simply take care of ourselves, do something fun, whether it's all of us doing karaoke or dancing or painting. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got some questions coming in via the Whova app, so I'm going to ask those now. First one is, I have a kindergartner and a middle schooler, and neither get much or anything to do via the school for Wellness Day. What programs are available? How can parents get in on even helping create an environment for wellness days? So Jen, I'd like to start with you on this one. This is I think that's maybe more for our educators here, the people in schools, but if others want to chime in as well. But Jen, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I might kick it over to JG because it's, I'm less aware of resources for younger children. I think it would be important to work with the folks at the school site. If I wasn't completely clear if there is already a wellness day, but the offerings are very thin, or if the participant wants to create a wellness day, I'm going to pass that to JG because I honestly am not aware of resources for little ones. Yeah.
I would say just this, there is something, I think, but the offerings are very thin.
Right. I believe Fridays are supposed to be wellness days for West Contra Costa Unified students, right? And so I have a third grader here in West Contra Costa and a sixth grader, and again, they are very thin. I think as families, like if it's around mental and emotional well-being, there's some great, My for Life Project has a few free bilingual app. We have a website has free resources, right? We also have, I would recommend, I think Go Noodle has some great yoga and mindfulness things and other emotional things. So I think when it comes down to it, I know the district has tried to. I know I haven't seen it on my side, right, as a parent, so I'm not so sure what's being offered. But always as a parent, like reach out to everyone around, and we'll try to do our best to support the gaps and definitely making sure that those resources are readily available. Something we want to leverage as a community.
Thank you, Joyce. Can you give us more thoughts on this?
Yeah, a little bit. I think from our site's perspective, we have a bunch of partnerships that we've encouraged them to do their work with students on Fridays. As the day goes on a Friday, fewer kids participate later in the afternoon. I think because it took us some time to get the partnerships off the ground, students had already kind of internalized, I go to homeroom on Friday and then my weekend begins. So getting kids to log back in for a group or a club has been tricky. If a school has an after school provider, all of those providers were asked to do programming on Fridays. And there's been varying degrees of success with that. Not everyone has launched programming and others are able to pull it off. So it really depends on the school, but absolutely you could bring it up to your school site council or admin and make some requests for more programming on Fridays.
Do you know if Ms. Petrelli or if principals are commonly getting this kind of question, like, how can I help with Wellness Day?
I think the question at our site with Ms. Petrelli, with our community school, is how can we get more kids to take advantage of what we're offering on Fridays?
Okay.
How do we engage kids when they're done on the screen and they think Friday is light and the weekend has started?
Gotcha.
So we keep trying, like we have a cooking class and the parents can pick up all the ingredients, and that's through our after school program. And Project Success runs an online scavenger hunt every Friday. I do my stress management club. We try to pack it, but it's a matter of getting kids to log in.
Okay. Thank you. Cynthia, do you have anything you want to add here before we go to some questions?
Not much. I think one of the things that I would encourage that parent is definitely, like we said, site council. There's also sites like Cahoots that has mindfulness activities for students in that age level as well, if you're looking for ideas. But I would like really hone in, if you're willing to support, schools are willing to work with you to create other spaces for students. We have Wellness Wednesdays and we have parents who come in and like sometimes just engage with students in the students' grade level and talk about careers. So if you have a time, please do it. Like, don't be discouraged by like the offerings. That's what we're here for as a community, to keep providing offerings and keep innovating in this space.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have of course we have more questions than we have time, but Teresa Hernandez, I think, has had her hand up for quite a while. And could we unmute Teresa and let her ask her question?
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Teresa Hernández. Yo tengo dos niños, Kenia de 25 con síndrome de Down y Emanuel de 11, también con un IP. Mi pregunta es esta, sabemos que los niños están teniendo mucho estrés, mucha ansiedad y más cuando no se abre Canvas o Zoom. Ahorita estamos trabajando con eso, ¿verdad? Pero cuando los salones de clases estén abiertos, nuestros niños no van a estar emocionalmente o académicamente también en su grado. ¿Cuál es el plan que se va a seguir? Yo abogo mucho por la educación de mi hijo. Él está recibiendo terapia dentro de su salud mental, pero también va a necesitar psiquiatría, me acabo de enterar. Entonces sí lo estamos trabajando en un tiempo corto, porque ahorita lo estamos viviendo, pero ¿cuáles son las expectativas en un largo tiempo? Gracias.
That's a really, really interesting question. And we don't actually have any district administrators here to answer that question. But Joyce, I'm wondering if you can take a shot at that, maybe followed by Jen.
Jen, can I pass to you first? I only hit translation halfway through and I don't
Okay,
know that I got the whole question.
I understood the question to be, what is the plan as we move forward and as we come back to school? Did I get that correctly?
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
and like
So
how do
I
kids transition
believe-
back?
Yes, I want to really lift up Teresa for asking that question. I think it is the $1 million question in this moment. I think I could offer my idea, but I am a very little fish in this very big sea. And I think what Tom mentioned a moment ago, that kind of planning will happen at the district level and then will come down to the schools. I think, you know, my partner is a teacher. These are constant conversations. How are we going to pick up the pieces when we get back in the building with many young people who are behind? I'm very respectful of that question, and I'm sorry that I don't have an adequate answer.
Can I take a,
Yes,
I'm gonna take a
please.
stab at this?
Yeah, please.
Señora, ¿cómo está? Buenas noches. Una de las cosas que les recomendaría es que ya que su hijo tiene su plan de IEP, es que siga trabajando con su coordinador para ver cuáles son las otras, cuál puede ser la próxima reunión que tengan, donde usted exprese algunas de estas inquietudes, porque el plan de él le cubre a su estudiante no solamente las cosas que están pasando ahora, pero también la trayectoria de que lo que usted quiere ver para su estudiante. So, si su estudiante necesita más ayuda ahora mismo, lo que tiene que hablar es pedir una reunión, que usted puede pedir una reunión, se llama reconvene, cuando usted quiera, para dejar plantado con cuáles son las inquietudes que tienes y que el plan se vuelva también a las expectativas que usted tiene para su estudiante, no solamente en la salud mental, pero también en lo académico.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a great point. And like, this is a case of where a parent has a concern about a child with a disability and an IEP, and that's really great advice. We have another person with their hand raised. That's Ursula Rodriguez, and I'd like to let's unmute her so that she can ask her question.
Thank you. And my question is similar to the one that was just posed. I was wondering if you can speak more to special education. I have a 4th grader with an IEP, a first grader with a 504. On a good day, my 1st grader has his computer in the room with him. Forget about camera on. And I know he will catch up. But my daughter is neurotypical. She has dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, ADHD, and a speech language impairment in pragmatic social thinking and language. School has always been beyond frustrating, but I can't deal with I can't have her slip back. You know, I gotta keep her on grade level. I gotta keep people knowing that she can learn. And if you could just speak to some of that special ed stuff. I mean, people can't get assessed right now. It's very hard for them to get through services. They can't meet the hours. And the Friday wellness days is also a little bit, I'm so glad teachers have it, but it's a little mind-boggling to call it a wellness day when it's so hard for these kids that need extra services. And I wish they could get them on Friday because there's no class content, but they can't. Thank you.
Okay. Joyce, do you have any thoughts that you can share on this?
I don't. I think we know that especially for kids with IEPs and disabilities, this is horrible. And I believe in many discussions of reopening, that's one of the priority groups that we want to get back on campus first because the services are needed and required by law. It sounds like you have some connections, Ms. Ursula, with providers. I would make sure the school psychologist is over and on that team and convene an IEP as soon as possible once there is a plan for return on what the plan will be in helping your child to maintain and not slip and re-enter. But that is a very hard struggle.
Joyce, thanks for that. And I question maybe for you, for Jellic. I mean, when I was on the board, I mean, the board was told that IEPs were happening and like meetings were happening. And I hear Ursula suggesting that maybe that's not, I'll just say not as comprehensive as we thought it might be. Any thoughts on that situation?
I mean, during distance learning,
Yeah.
I would say yes, we are having IEPs all the time. They're clunkier. For some parents, it's hard to log in and participate as fully as they would like to. But there aren't assessments. There's not new assessments for potential IEPs. But yes, there are IEPs going on. It may not feel as effective.
Okay, that's helpful. And I want to remind Ursula and everybody else that here at the Ed Fair, we will be hosting a special session on special education on Saturday from 1:45 until 3. We're going to try and fit in one more question here from Maria Franco Kearns, and then we need to close it out for the evening. It's been really informative. So could we unmute Maria Franco Kearns?
Buenas tardes, señor Panas. Buenas tardes todos, cada uno de ustedes. Mi pregunta es, ¿cómo voy a saber si mi niña está preparada para los exámenes que vienen en febrero estatales? ¿Y quién me va a dar las herramientas para que yo pueda apoyarla y esté lista?
Can I jump in real quick, Tom?
Sure, that'd be great.
Hola, señora, ¿cómo estás? La primera cosa que yo puedo decir es que antes que empiece el febrero, ¿no es cierto? Tenemos que mirar más que lo académico a la parte social y emocional, ¿no es cierto? Entonces, ojalá que ella está disfrutando de lo que tiene ahora y más que eso, cuando vienen los exámenes, ya sé para mi hija que está en grado 6, y le dije que haga lo mejor que puedo, pero este año no va a representar lo que sabe, ¿no es cierto? Porque ha aprendido muy diferente. Pero primariamente es cómo estás mentalmente, emocionalmente. Y cuando los niños vienen de un lugar de orgullo, ¿no es cierto? Un sentido de bien fuerza de adentro, van a ser mejor, pero va a ser diferente este año y esos exámenes no van a representar la verdad, ¿no es cierto? Y hay que poner ese vista también.
Okay, Gigi, thank you very much. So we need to start wrapping up our session here. I just want to thank our panelists for the wonderful insight and will that they gave us and really helping us work our way through this. And like, you know, as we talked before, like, I mean, like, in my mind, anybody who thinks they don't have a mental health problem or mental health issue right now is not being very real with them, or like there are 4 or 5 or 6 standard deviations away from the norm. Because like, you know, I sit here at my desk at times for like half an hour, just kind of like, oh, you know, this is like affecting everybody. So I really appreciate everyone's comments here. So I just want to say our next session is tomorrow at 5. It's an opportunity to meet the Pinole family of schools and the El Cerrito family of schools. And the Zoom links are in the chat. And you can also use the Whova application or go to the Ed Fair website, www.wccedfair.com, for Zoom information. Tomorrow night also from 4 to 5, we're going to have a community organization open house, and a lot of important organizations from around the district will be represented there. And I'd really encourage anybody who wants to find out more about these. There's some great organizations here that are so important to our ecosystem. And aside from that, last thing we have is our raffle winner. And let me just see, I think I saw a message about the raffle. The raffle winner is Petra Alegria. So Petra, congratulations. Wonderful, congratulations. I just want to thank everyone, my participants, the attendees, Wonderful job, well worth the time. I'm so glad you could all be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Buenas noches,
Bye, everyone.
gracias.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Tenga buena
everybody.
noche.
Be well, everyone. Heartfulness.
Noches.